Welcome to Caribbean Whispers by Renee. The Caribbean Sea sparkled under the morning sun as the cruise ship Ocean Paradise sailed toward its next destination. Among the hundreds of crew members were three men who would one day become famous for all the wrong reasons. There was Leroy, a cheerful Jamaican who worked in guest services. There was Raj, a fast-talking Trinidadian who worked in entertainment. And there was Marlon, a calm but stubborn Bajan who worked in the ship's kitchen. The three men knew each other casually for months, but one rainy afternoon changed everything. The crew cafeteria was packed. Leroy arrived carrying a plate piled so high with food it looked like a small mountain. Raj stared. "Boss, are you feeding yourself or the entire Caribbean?" Leroy sat down. "Me a work hard. Hard work need fuel." Marlon looked at the plate. "Fuel? That's enough food to power the ship." The men laughed. Soon they started eating together every day. As Caribbean people often do, every lunch turned into a debate. The biggest argument? Food. One afternoon Raj slapped the table. "Everybody know Trinidad have the best food in the Caribbean." Leroy nearly choked on his juice. "What?" Marlon slowly put down his fork. "Raj, you wake up this morning and decide to tell lies?" Raj pointed at them. "Doubles alone can defeat all your national dishes." Leroy stood dramatically. "Security! Security! This man dangerous!" The cafeteria erupted with laughter. For weeks the arguments continued. Jerk chicken versus doubles. Flying fish versus curry goat. Bake and shark versus escovitch fish. Every discussion ended the same way. Nobody agreed. One evening after work they sat on the upper deck watching the sunset. Passengers danced nearby while a steel pan band played softly. Raj sighed. "Imagine opening a Caribbean restaurant one day." Leroy nodded. "That would be nice." Marlon smiled. "3 countries. 1 restaurant." Raj pointed. "Exactly." Leroy laughed. "People would finally know Jamaica have the best food." Raj nearly fell from his chair. Marlon rolled his eyes. And so another argument began. None of them knew that years later that joke would become a reality. 5 years passed. The three friends left cruise ship life but stayed in touch. One day they reunited in Jamaica. Leroy met them at the airport. The moment Raj walked through the arrivals gate, he shouted, "Move aside! The culinary king has arrived!" Leroy grabbed his suitcase. "The king of confusion, maybe." Marlon followed behind. "Can we reach the car before the fighting starts?" Too late. The fighting had already started. That evening they sat outside a small restaurant overlooking the sea. Business was slow. The owner complained constantly. Customers were few. The food wasn't bad. The management was. Suddenly Raj leaned forward. "You remember the cruise ship idea?" Leroy frowned. "What idea?" "The restaurant." Marlon stopped drinking. Raj continued. "A restaurant with Jamaican, Trinidadian, and Bajan food." The table went quiet. Leroy slowly smiled. "That actually sound good." Marlon nodded. "We each know food." Raj slapped the table. "We can do it." Leroy raised a finger. "One condition." "What?" "Jamaican food gets the biggest section." Raj nearly spilled his drink. "Why?" "Because Jamaica famous." Marlon sighed. "Here we go." The argument lasted 3 hours. At the end they agreed on one thing. They would open a restaurant together. That turned out to be the easiest part. Finding a building took weeks. Finding staff took months. But choosing a name? That nearly destroyed the friendship. The first meeting started peacefully. Raj suggested, "Caribbean Kings." Leroy shook his head. "Sound like a football team." Marlon suggested, "Island Flavors." Raj frowned. "That sound like seasoning." Leroy proudly stood. "I have the perfect name." The others waited. Leroy's Caribbean Paradise. Silence. Raj blinked. Marlon blinked. A waitress nearby blinked. Raj pointed. "Why your name in it?" "Because I thought of it." "You just thought of it 5 seconds ago." The debate continued for days. Every suggestion became an argument. At one point Marlon suggested, "3 islands." Raj liked it. Leroy objected. "What if people think there are only 3 islands in the Caribbean?" Eventually a customer overheard their discussion and shouted, "Why not call it 3 Flags?" Everyone stopped. The name represented Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados. For once all 3 agreed. The customer received a free meal. Years later they would still argue about who really came up with the name. After months of planning, painting, hiring staff, and arguing over every tiny detail, 3 Flags Restaurant finally opened its doors. The entire community showed up. The mayor came. Local reporters came. Even people who admitted they were only there to see if the 3 owners would start fighting. At first, everything seemed perfect. Then disaster struck. A customer walked in and asked a simple question. "What's your best dish?" The 3 owners froze. Leroy immediately pointed to the Jamaican section. "Jerk chicken." Raj shoved his hand away. "Doubles." Marlon stepped between them. "Flying fish and cuckoo." The customer looked confused. "So which one should I order?" All 3 answered at the same time. "Mine." The customer backed away slowly. The staff quickly learned never to ask the owners food-related questions. Within weeks the restaurant became famous. Not just because the food was excellent, but because every night customers could watch the owners argue. One evening a tourist recorded Leroy and Raj debating whether curry goat was superior to doubles. The video went viral. Millions watched. People from all over the Caribbean began visiting 3 Flags. Some came for the food. Others came for the entertainment. One customer laughed. "This is better than television." Another replied, "And cheaper." Business exploded. Soon there were lines outside the restaurant every weekend. The 3 friends finally began making real money. Unfortunately, success created a new problem. One busy Saturday, Leroy checked the sales report. His eyes widened. "Look at this." Raj and Marlon rushed over. The report showed which dishes sold the most that month. Number 1. Trinidadian doubles. Raj jumped onto a chair. "I am the champion." Customers applauded. Leroy looked horrified. Marlon looked annoyed. For the next week Raj wouldn't stop bragging. He wore a homemade crown. He called himself His Royal Deliciousness. He signed restaurant receipts with the title. Eventually Leroy snapped. "We need a competition." Raj grinned. "Good. So people can officially see Trinidad win." Marlon folded his arms. "We'll see." The competition was announced online. Each owner would prepare their signature dish. Customers would vote. The winner would receive a giant trophy. The event attracted hundreds of people. The atmosphere felt like a sporting event. People waved Jamaican, Trinidadian, and Bajan flags. Music blasted. The judges tasted everything. Hours later the votes were counted. The crowd held its breath. The winner was a tie. Nobody could believe it. The scores were exactly equal. Raj shouted, "Impossible!" Leroy shouted, "Count again!" Marlon shouted, "Count slower!" The votes were checked 3 times. Still a tie. The crowd erupted with laughter. After years of arguing, nobody had won. That evening the restaurant finally became quiet. The customers left. The lights dimmed. The 3 friends sat outside overlooking the sea. For a while nobody spoke. Then Marlon smiled. "You realize something?" "What?" asked Leroy. "We spent years trying to prove whose food was best." Raj nodded. "So?" Marlon pointed toward the packed restaurant. People came because all 3 cultures were together. The others thought about it. He was right. Customers loved the jerk chicken. They loved the doubles. They loved the flying fish. But what made 3 Flags special was that it celebrated the entire Caribbean. Not just one island. Leroy laughed. "So you're saying nobody won?" "Exactly." Raj groaned. "I hate when he's right." The 3 friends burst out laughing. The same way they had laughed years ago on the cruise ship. 10 years later, 3 Flags became one of the most famous restaurants in the Caribbean. Tourists traveled thousands of miles to eat there. The walls were covered with photographs from every Caribbean nation. And every evening, like clockwork, customers could still hear the owners arguing. Jerk chicken is king. Doubles is undefeated. Flying fish is superior. The staff no longer paid attention. The customers loved it. And despite all the shouting, teasing, and endless debates, everyone knew the truth. The restaurant was successful because 3 stubborn Caribbean friends had learned something important. The Caribbean is strongest when its islands stand together, even if they never agree on whose food tastes best. And that brings us to the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an adventure. Thank you for spending your time with us, and until next time, take care, stay safe, and keep the stories alive.